Hello and welcome to another Math 101 video. Today we're going to look at lesson 2-6, which is called What Ratio Should I Choose? And the idea here is that there are a lot of situations we can be in where we have a lot of data that describes the same thing in different ways, and we can therefore create an awful lot of ratios. And how do we kind of go about determining what's the best ratio to use? Well, part of that depends on what it is we're trying to figure out and how we're trying to communicate and what kind of message we're trying to send and ultimately what our goals are. What we're actually going to look at today are just some data and look at a single idea, but find that by looking at different ratios, we get different rankings of, in this case, countries, and specifically dealing with how much debt the countries have. So I'm going to scroll down here on page 151, and we begin with a table which gives us 5 countries: the United States, Greece, India, Brazil, and Nigeria, and their debt in US dollars back in December of 2014. The United States had $18,152 billion in debt, or another way to say that's 18.152 trillion. Greece 376 billion, India 425 billion, Brazil 535 billion, and Nigeria 22 billion. If we assume least debt is the best, then if we ranked these countries, Nigeria would be the best, it has the smallest debt, then would be Greece, then would be India, then would be Brazil, then would be the United States. But just simply looking at their debt doesn't tell the whole story. There's more to knowing about these countries. How big are they? How many people do they have? What kind of economies do they have, etc. So if we scroll to the next page, we're given a new table that has the same 5 countries, and it gives us some population information. And what we're asked to do up here in the instruction is, starting with the idea of population, given each country's population, find the ratio of debt per person in each country. That implies that we're going to look for a debt per population number, because that's going to give us a debt per one population, if you will, or debt per one person. That's a ratio of debt per person. For example, for the US debt is 18,152 billion. If we convert that to a number without the billions, we get the value you see here in blue. I'm going to scroll back up just for a quick moment to the previous page so you can see that number. That's where that came from, was this table right here. And in the bottom, we use the population number here on page 152 for the United States, 319 million, written with all the zeros without the word million. And then we divide. That's what this formula here is telling us to do. That is, we're converting it to a unit ratio, and we end up with a debt of $56,902.82 per one person. So that's where the 1 comes from in our unit ratio. You can do the same thing using the debt numbers from the previous page, the population numbers for this page, for each of these 4 countries, and you should get these numbers. You should try that on your own. Make sure that you're figuring this out correctly and working this through the calculator correctly. Once we have those numbers, we're asked to rank the countries again from best to worst, and we're going to assume once again that the lowest debt per person is the best. So Nigeria has the lowest debt per person at $124.29 per person. India comes next, followed by Brazil, and then we see Greece, and then the United States has the largest debt per person. This is a different ranking than we saw on the previous page. If we look back here really quickly, we saw that while Nigeria had the best, and Greece was the second best, Greece has now moved to the 4th best in our new list. And India jumped up to 2nd best. So this changes things a little bit, and it gives us maybe a little bit better information. What's the debt on a per person basis? Now we can compare these countries a little bit more accurately, because we're taking away the fact that they are very different in size. We're going to do something similar. We're going to consider gross domestic product, or GDP, and go through a similar exercise. Our goal, as stated in the instruction, is to find the ratio of debt per GDP in each country. That is, how many dollars of debt per $1 of GDP. So our formula is going to be debt divided by GDP. That's going to give us our unit ratio, which is a ratio of debt per GDP, or $1 of GDP. Again, using the United States debt number of 18 trillion, $152 billion. And hopefully that window will go away here shortly. There we go. And then the U.S. is GDP, which is given in this table, of $17,460 billion. We divide, we get a ratio of $1.04 of debt to $1 of GDP. And if we do that for all the countries, we get these values. And again, you should try this on your own and make sure that you can get these values accurately. What we get is an idea of the debt of the country based on the size of its economy. That's essentially one of the things that GDP measures, is how big is the country's economy. And if we rank again, Nigeria still in first place. India is second. Brazil is third. The United States actually moves up a spot to fourth best. And the worst is now Greece on a per GDP basis. So you can see that our rankings change. For the fourth question, you're asked to basically look at the 3 rankings we've done so far, one based only on debt, one based on debt per person, one based on debt per GDP, and come up with your own ranking as to which you think which country is the best and which country is the worst. So we don't necessarily have to rely on a single ranking. We can look at multiple rankings and then try to come up with yet a new ranking based on those multiple rankings. Answers will vary. This is kind of your opinion as to what you think makes sense for the best to the worst.